You're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Okay, and hopefully, does everybody consent to being recorded for the purpose of preserving all these conversations?
And just so you know, we are setting up an EJGP YouTube channel, so all of the recordings for our meetings will be available there. And we will link to that on our website. So if somebody you know wasn't able to make it, you'll be able to send them the link.
Awesome.
Catch it there.
Okay, so fun disclaimer. The views expressed in presentations made at EJGP network meetings or other EJGP events are those of the individual speakers and not necessarily of EJGP, other organizations, groups, or individuals in the network, or our funders. Presentations at EJGP events or our presence at others events do not constitute an endorsement of any speaker or organization's views, ideas, or services. So these meetings are intended to be for educational purposes and hopefully to connect with each other and do not replace independent professional judgment. So thanks for bearing with us. And there's Ms. Carol and Matt, a couple other advisory members. Shout out to them. And with that, I'm going to go to Jason to provide some updates before we jump into the panel.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's really great to have all of you here today, and it's really wonderful. There are a lot of new faces and names who have been joining us today, so welcome if this is your first meeting. Really excited that you're here. There's really just one big thing that I want to share with you today, and that is that 2 Saturdays ago, we held our advocacy and organizing training. Well, we had the final event of our advocacy and organizing training where the participants that we've been working with since the summer held and hosted a housing advocacy summit, they called it, at the UPMC Neighborhood Center in East Liberty. And it was a great success. They had 2 panels, one of which featured people with lived experience who are facing kind of housing challenges or who had faced housing challenges in the past, and then a kind of a response panel of people who were working to solve those issues, to address kind of housing issues. And we had Ms. Carol, who was one of our panelists on the second panel, so we thank her for being there. And there were several other people who were on this call who are also involved in a lot of the work in getting that training off the ground, including Fawn Montgomery and Miss Sherry Smith, if she's still on the call, who are part of our steering committee for that project. And it was just a really great event. I'm going to share my screen to just show a couple pictures. So this was 2 Saturdays ago. It was a really great event. We had about 60 people there all together. And hold on, whoops, that's not what I wanted you to see. There we go. Okay. So we had, yeah, I'm just going to kind of jump through these, but we had, you know, a good number of people there. We had a few participants, and we had some housing organizations and other organizations there who offer resources to connect people with support and who are also doing housing advocacy work. So it was just a really great event all around. Just get to the panel, some of the panel questions. Sorry, there are several pictures of me at the beginning, but yeah, there you can see our kind of beginnings of our panel. Yeah, so it was, and there we have Terry McGeorge, who is our host, one of our participants in the project, who is also our host. So it's a really great event. We will be posting more pictures from the event in our newsletter that's coming out this week. And the other thing I just wanted to alert you all to, that another part of that project was our participants wanted to put together some resources that would really help really briefly explain what people would need to know about different housing issues and where they could go to get resources or support for those issues. So, and we created 3 what we call info and resource guides, one on tenant rights, one on evictions and one on unhealthy housing. And we worked with Bob Damewood and Ife Orabiri from Regional Housing Legal Services to kind of put this together, make sure that it was all correct. And they are now up on our website, on the EJGP website under Tools and Resources. You just click on Info Guides and you can find the PDFs there. We have an English version and then we have a Spanish language version, which might be updated in the next few days. We kind of just have to confirm some of the language there, but the English one is ready to go. And all three, at least for right now, are in this one document. So you just have to click it and it opens up. Essentially 1 page of basic information about those 3 topics, what people have to know, should know, and then the backside of it is kind of about key organizations to go to for resources. So I'll be sharing those links in the newsletter as well. That'll come out within the next week or so. And so just have a look, take a look, feel free to share them. They are there really for the whole network and for anybody who wants to use them. So, our participants were really proud of the info guides and the panels that they held. So thank you for all of you who helped out with it. And thank you to those of you who supported by being there. And yeah, if you didn't hear that, there will be a newsletter in the next week or so with a little bit more information about that and some other things. There are a lot of different events coming up that many of you are involved with, and many of you may like to be a part of. So back to you, Yvette.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, time to jump in. So I was saying to Jason, with the elections coming up, I feel like you can't turn on the radio or anything else without hearing about what's happening around misinformation, what's happening around, trying to get people to vote and so forth. And even for me in this space, like, it feels overwhelming and not quite sure how to prepare for November. So today we're really going to focus on, what's happening in the voting space in terms of what's being challenged, what's going to be, what can be done about that, and so forth, what measures are being introduced. And then we're going to talk about this bombarding people of information and what do you do with that? How can you help your friends and colleagues with that? How can you wade through all this craziness? So we have 3 panelists with us today, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves after I name them so that I can't do them justice. But with the League of Women Voters, we have Ruth Quint. Good morning.
Good morning.
And then we have Calum Matheson, professor from Pitt, who's studying disinformation at large, and Tobias Estes, is that how you say it? Estes from New Voices for Reproductive Justice. So I'm going to let them just say a word about themselves before we jump in. And I'll just go to Ruth, whoever I see first. Sorry.
Okay. I'm Ruth Quint. I'm a member and a board member at the League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh, and I'm also the webmaster. I used to be a teacher at Steel Center Votech in the Mon Valley years ago. And when the League of Women Voters, I'm a relatively recent member. I joined about 6 years ago. Many of the members have been there for 40 or 50 years.
Wow.
But when they learned that I had taught computer science, they quickly drafted me to be the webmaster, and that's been keeping me busy ever since. So happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us. And Calum.
Hi, everyone. I'm Calum Matheson. I'm the chair of the Department of Communication at Pitt. And as a researcher, I concentrate on disinformation, conspiracy theories, and things like that. It's a growth industry, unfortunately. I was also the director of the debate program, both at Pitt and at other universities in the past. So I spent a lot of time working with applied disinformation to political consulting and things like that. So these problems take up a lot of my time and concern. So thanks for having me here.
Thanks. And Tobias.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning. My name is Tobias Estes. I am the Integrated Voter Engagement Manager for Pennsylvania for New Voices for Reproductive Justice. I oversee our entire voter engagement team within Philadelphia and then Pittsburgh, hopefully around June and July. And I've been working in the voter engagement space for about 10 years. So whether from all the way from a canvasser to my position now. So just interested. I'm just excited to be here.
Thanks, Tobias. Okay, and actually Tobias is going to go first because here at EJGP, we're really trying to ground these conversations in what residents are experiencing and really how to ground the work we're doing in what people need on the ground. So I'm going to lead with Tobias, and if you can share what are some of the responses and reactions that you're hearing when you're doing on the ground voter engagement.
Right now, the primary responses are just people are not interested right now. They have felt very disenfranchised and and just not put in the center of attention lately, and they are starting to just disengage and start to just stay more community based or just check out in general to the voter process. So this is something where when we come across it, we want to figure out why, because we want to start trying to combat that, because when you have these situations where people are disengaged, you're starting to see more people not vote or to not even use that the options of being not committed or anything like that to voice their frustrations. And it's taking away certain resources that they can possibly receive from voting. So that's what we're seeing at the present moment.
And I'm just like, do you think that's changed over the last 10 years? Is it getting better or worse?
I think it's evolved to a sense where it's always been there, but it's more hype. People are more hyper aware and more vocal about their frustrations now. At first, it used to be more staying to yourselves, and as over the past 10 years, we've seen politics become more of a talking point, more of at the forefront of people's lives, and they're starting to talk about it more, or to just say they don't do nothing for me, so why do I care about them? Right? I just care about my family. I care about what happens in my home. And if they start coming to our homes and start talking to us, then we might start paying more attention and doing more. So right now, I think it's become a little bit, for the lack of a better term, polarized. And having to figure out how we combat that polarization is by talking to community members in community, and also every year, and not just every 2 or 4 years, or 2, 4, 6 years, because we need to start showing people that we actually care about them, and not just in hoping and showing that elected officials do not just care about just being elected. They should start caring about actually helping the constituents that got them there.
Thanks. And Ruth, so like, I think I want to build on that, and given what, Tobias is hearing, and I'm sure you guys hear it too, like, how is your organization addressing these responses? Like, what techniques are you guys using?
Well, I'd like to, back up what Tobias said. We go into a lot of high school classrooms and give presentations and voter registration. And this year and last year, there's just like increasing cynicism and frustration among the students, where we used to get most of the class registering. Now many of them, just like, don't bother me with it. And I really feel like the pandemic increased the disengagement, the sense of powerlessness and frustration with students. And you're seeing that not just in voting, but also in school attendance. School attendance rates have dropped markedly all across the country, in urban areas and suburban areas and wealthy areas and non-wealthy areas, rural areas. And it's very alarming, the disengagement that we're seeing with high school students in general. At the same time, though, we feel like the solution is engagement. It's personal engagement. It's getting together, talking person to person instead of sending materials or a video, going into the classroom with the classroom teacher present and talking to these kids really does seem to be effective. Last year, the civic ed team in 2023, they went into 62 classrooms, gave presentations, reached over 1,000 high school students, and provided them with voter registration. And a lot of them, we get some very good feedback following the presentation, and we try to engage them on what does affect them with government. They may very well feel very legitimately that government is not working for them. It's working for the people who are in government or for the people who already have the resources. But we talked during the pandemic, look what a difference it made who your governor was or who your mayor was. With your experience with the pandemic, was school open or was it closed? Were your businesses open or were they closed? Were you safe or were you not safe? Did you have resources, health resources? Did you not have resources? And we looked at how that experience varied from place to place based on the decisions of politicians, and sort of brought it home like it does matter. It does matter who's in charge. And I think that got to them. They understood that. They saw that your government has an effect whether you want it to or not.
Yeah.
And also, I'd like to say on a positive note that here in Allegheny County, our voter rates, our participation in the elections has been increasing.
Oh, good.
Election over election, year after year, to the point that we're making national news here with Allegheny County and the engagement in Allegheny County. So although the mood is bad, I think if you look at the data, you do see signs of hope. And I think it's important to grasp onto those and say, we're doing it right. Let's pat ourselves on the back a little bit. Look at all the people here today who are engaged and who are trying to make things better. And if you look at the turnover, generational turnover in Allegheny County in the local government, I think you see that it is making a difference. I think change is happening. It's just, it's so slow.
Yeah.
It's so slow.
What are those rates, Ruth? Like, how have they increased? Do you know?
I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but I know I usually post it on the on my website after each election, and it's like, good for us. We voted, you know, in this rate, and it was more than the last time we had a mayoral election, or it was more than the last legislative election, and it does continue to go up. So
Thank you for that.
we are making a difference, and we
No, and I
are
love
voting, but
Yeah,
it's
and I love-
the mood is bad.
Yeah. I love that you're starting with the high schoolers too. Like I have a high schooler, and it's interesting to hear that, you know, you're starting from the bottom and kind of hoping to build that enthusiasm.
Yeah, we also go out to senior communities. I forget, like, let me look at if I have my thing. We logged like 3,000 hours or more out in the community, and we designed and distributed election material to subsidize senior housing. We put out door hangers. We send out packets of ready, set, vote materials. And yeah, we get out there, and people like to have something in their hand. They like to see your face and to know that somebody is involved and wants them to join and participate. So
Thanks for that. Okay, so Calum, I want to pivot to the information piece of this. And if you could, we talked about misinformation and disinformation in the past couple elections. I myself didn't know the difference. So can you lead with that definition? And then, or actually, maybe let me go to Fred's question first and then go to that real quick.
Yeah, that sounds great. You want to start with Fred's question, or you want me to?
I guess, Fred, do you have a question kind of for?
I do. 5 years ago, when I was part of the last election process, I challenged the group to move from transactional to transformational work. That was not well received. I think what you're seeing now is people are tired of being seen every 2 and 4 years for election cycles. And we don't build the skill sets that even when we recruit people to be part of the process, how might that increase their professional acumen? I feel like it's wasted money. Like there's a lot of money thrown at this every 2 and 4 years, and none of it's tied to a sustainable ecosystem. And so I would ask this group to consider how might this time be different. And despite the touch points that we're having, they're transactional in nature. And what's required is transformational activity that builds people's ability to understand the technical aspect of voting, what it means to each sector, and how they stay engaged, not just at the voting day, but 365 days a year.
That's a great point, Fred, on the leveraging those skills, because I think we don't think about that as much. So Calum, if you could start with kind of defining some terms before we jump into that piece.
Sure. Yeah, it's confusing and a lot of them overlap a lot, but usually when people say disinformation, people who pay attention to information and kind of focus on this. Disinformation is about deliberately lying, or it's just flat out, that's what it is. It's what we used to just call propaganda, and it's basically just the new word that we're using for that. So disinformation is like deliberately trying to get people to believe things that are false, or to spread information that the person who's doing it knows is wrong. Misinformation is information that's wrong, but it's not necessarily malicious. It's not someone doing it on purpose necessarily. They might believe what they're saying, but they might just be wrong about it. They might have bad information. The reason why this difference matters so much is that a lot of disinformation, like deliberate attempts to manipulate people's opinion, then gets spread by people who don't know it's wrong as misinformation. So disinformation turns to misinformation. There's another category. I apologize. This word is like not very nice, but this is what we call it.
No, that's great. Yeah.
The other category that we say is just bullshit. And bullshit is different.
Okay.
Bullshit is when people say things and don't care whether it's true or false. They're saying things because they want you to think something about them, think that they know something, think that they're on your side, they want, or to attract attention or whatever it is. But disinformation is deliberate manipulation, misinformation is wrong, and bullshit is information that people spread with no care about whether it's right or wrong, to do something other than persuade people about the information, but to persuade them to believe something about the person who's saying it instead.
Okay. And how do you see that playing out for this year's elections?
All three of those things are everywhere.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. Like there's coordinated disinformation that happens. Like political parties deliberately try to deceive people. Both parties do it. They don't do it equally, but they both do it. And once that happens, once those things kind of take hold, then people spread the stuff that they hear, partly because most of us really only hear a limited segment of opinion. We look for stuff that confirms what we already believe. And when people hear things and they feel strongly about it, they tend to try to find more information that tells them about the thing that they care about, not really test whether it's true or false. So it starts with disinformation, and then people kind of spread those things accidentally or on purpose in smaller groups. And it starts as sometimes as a coordinated strategy. But the place where it matters most, I think, to most of us anyway, isn't really at that kind of high level of grand plans. It's just what people in your community say and what they think. And people get information from people that they trust. And those people aren't necessarily trying to mislead them. They just might be wrong. So it spreads it kind of micro person to person. We're always talking about Russian bots manipulating the election, or people lying about stuff on Twitter or whatever. Excuse me, that matters. But it matters most because your family members believe it and they convince someone to accept it. And it spreads in groups like Discord and WhatsApp, and all that stuff is really where you see more of it now than you used to.
Yeah, I would say that, just on a personal note to add that here is that my brother is somebody who's, fallen prey to this. And I think what's been the worst about these election processes is that it's you know, it tears apart families, which is even like tearing apart communities, and something that you thought was politics has really become more of a systemic problem in communities, you know.
Yeah, I wanted just real fast to relate this to what Tobias and Ruth already said. That feeling of disengagement or people checking out, like a lot of disinformation isn't supposed to change your mind. It's supposed to make you feel hopeless so you don't do anything. Like that attitude is in some ways really the target, not like actually convincing people to switch their party vote or whatever it is.
So Tobias, like, how are you seeing this show up in your work? Like, kind of those three types of really information. How much is that playing into what you guys are doing on the ground?
So it definitely comes up. And you find yourself like when I talk to our canvassers from this year and then from previous jobs, they are fighting a battle that before they can actually get into the conversation that they're there to talk about. So if we're there to talk about, let's say we're just there to talk about the election, and they're having to combat the misinformation, disinformation, in the beginning, which takes away from them getting to that actual conversation, because then most canvassers get frustrated and they stop and they just disengage from the conversation and go to the next door. So we're not able to actually have any meaningful conversations with people in that moment because of the misinformation and disinformation and the BS. So it's hard to actually get into those conversations. What I've seen, I can give like a personal story, even though this is pretty old. Like I think back in 2012, I was a young pup, but I was knocking on doors in a suburb in Virginia, and I was there to talk to a woman. I don't remember her name, but her husband answered the door. We're talking about voter ID laws and how we wanted to stop the General Assembly from passing that bill. The husband answered the door and pushed his wife to the side, stopped her from talking, right?
Wow.
And continued to. I was telling him like, "Hey, we're here to talk about these specific things," and he was like, "Well, that what you're saying is not true," and started to tell me the propaganda that was coming from Fox News. And I was like, "Sir, that's not like this is not true. This is what's going on." And he was like, "Well, why would the news say it?" And so that's back in 2012, and we've seen just the evolving stages of that, where now that type of conversation, people aren't even allowing you to even have that conversation. They're not even allowing you to, even though I was not supposed to stay at that man's door for about 5 minutes. You now just like you're not telling me the truth. Close the door in your face. You're not even able to have that engagement. So that is something where we're struggling with, but also with just our canvassers on just like having to educate them specifically on what we're talking about, what we're trying to do, and then combating their misinformation and disinformation, so they can be knowledgeable on the doors. Like we have weekly meetings with our canvassers, and every single week we have to do this on a thorough basis, just so they can be properly informed and be like, oh, they didn't know. So it's a constant battle.
Because they have to be able to like constantly combat the fact checking and stuff, right? Is like respond to that.
Yeah, and it gets and honestly, they get frustrated either when they're making calls or when they're on like knocking on doors, which which then makes them be like, I really don't want to do this anymore because of that fight.
Yeah. And so I know in the chat I saw some questions about like, you know, what are resources? What can you do about that? So we're going to pivot to that because we don't like to just spend the whole call talking about the problem. So Ruth, you have stuff on your website about combating some of this disinformation and helping with voting. Can you share some about the materials that are available and other ways that you're supporting voting right?
Sure. I did put a link to our web page on mis and disinformation in the chat, and it so it's available to everyone. We emphasize a couple of tactics, and one is pre-bunking. As an educational, like, public service organization, we like to put out the information that allows people to build up their immunity to the disinformation. For example, we had a video out a couple years ago about the journey of your election ballot, showing like once you submit your ballot and put it through the scanner, what happens to it? It goes into a locked box, and then it's tallied, and then it's counted, and then the judge of elections at your local precinct has to hand deliver it to somebody. And what happens to it then? How many people watch it get counted? How is it stored in the warehouse? Things like that. And that helps people get a little bit of background to understand what's going on. And the reason we did that one is we had so many people in our organization who do work at the polls. And then they've said, you know, these accusations of fraud, they don't even make sense with the way the voting works. Like if you were working in the elections, you would know that this doesn't make any sense. And so we said, well, people need to know that. The other thing in 2020, when they introduced mail-in ballots all of a sudden during the pandemic and during all kinds of other changes that were going on, we put out a graphic called the Life and Times of the Pennsylvania Mail-in Ballot. And it tracked the ballot from when Jane Doe requested it to, you know, the request comes into the county office. What's happening at the county office? What's happening at your house? Why don't you see the ballot coming in? And it tried to spell out a lot of the facts that let people know what to expect, because there were so many questions and so much confusion and so many people trying to tell each other what they had found out and getting it wrong. And so we try to do pre-bunking. And every election cycle on our web team, we sit down 3 months ahead and we say, what are the confusing things going to be this cycle? And this time we decided it was going to be, who are all those convention delegates on my ballot? Now the ballots are coming out this week, and all of a sudden people are going to say, who are these convention delegates at the bottom? I don't know this. People don't like to not know what they're doing. They don't like to feel like they walked into the polls and there's a pop quiz, you know? So so we put out a block of information for anyone who Googles, who's this convention delegate, they'll come to our page. Google will get them to our page and they'll say, oh, this is what it is. I don't really need to worry about this too much. Okay, so we try to find the live question, the things that are going to confuse people, and put out information about it ahead of time. The other thing is that with actual disinformation, people are always looking for like the killer argument. Like for instance, if you have a friend who doesn't believe in global warming and you do believe in global warming, they're like, what can I say? What can I say that will like convince them like that? And that is not the way it works. It's not like a game of chess where you know the right move and then you win, because there's that personal element.
Yeah,
people don't like to be wrong. People take time and space to change their minds. And so you need to, above all, like not argue, not try to like pin somebody down or corner them with an argument, but maintain the relationship. Try to understand what they're believing. Try to get them to spell out what they think. Try to get them to understand what you think, and then walk away without trying to win, and maintain that relationship. And that's how people change their minds. So
that's great advice.
Yeah.
And I love that you said the thing about not wanting a pop quiz at the end of the ballot, because I felt like I personally felt a little bit about, there was some measure last time I was voting and I was like, oh, like what is it? You know, like when you're not prepared going in there, and then you just, you know, you make the best decision you can. But okay, so Calum, I want to just hear from you. You know, you do a ton of research. Like, how is this issue of information being dealt with more broadly? Like, are there any tactics that you see are working locally or nationally?
There's a lot of stuff that people are trying to do, and there isn't really good evidence about what works and what doesn't. You can find evidence about things that work in some places and with some people. Honestly, the kind of thing that we're doing right now is probably the most effective way to respond to misinformation and disinformation. actually getting people to talk about it, to think kind of critically about the information that they receive is really important. You can try to spread less biased news. That's important. It's important that people hear other people and see that other people take this seriously and try to share different opinions with them. But efforts to try to like clean up the media or add context to social media posts and things like that, there's not a ton of evidence that that works, but there is pretty good evidence, both from research and just anecdotally, just from having done this, that talking to people, trying to meet them where they are, figure out what they care about and relate your ideas to what they care about, all those things are pretty effective. So, you know, the whole purpose of reason why we're talking today, what we're doing right here, I think is one of the good first steps.
Yeah, I feel like I already learned a ton in like 20 minutes. So, okay. So I want to kind of this third piece of the conversation is, you know, what can people do about it? How can they get more involved? So I'm going to throw it to Tobias. What's going to be necessary to raise voter awareness? And is there anything like individuals can do to support this work?
So I'm a very, very like grassroots thinker. I wanted to piggyback on something that Mr. Fred B said. Is I agree wholeheartedly with. This is something where it has to be done every single year. It cannot be something that you just do every 2 to 4, right? Because we work specifically with impoverished people from in Black and brown neighborhoods and within Philadelphia and in the Allegheny County area. And another thing that's always stated is like, y'all only come around when y'all need something from me, right? It's transactional. And so the one thing that we have to do, because I want to put this on like the people who have the information, is we have to engage in the work that is hard, which is having those day-to-day conversations. One thing that we're specifically doing this year is we're trying to combat voter apathy. And the way we're doing that is one, having our canvassers talk to people on the phones and on the doors about voter apathy and do they even know what that means? And two, have they seen it? Can they, and how do they think we should combat it, right? Because to me, the people who are affected by it are the people who are we trying to touch. So let's find out what they think, right? And something that comes up consistently is this, it seems transactional and I'm done with being the one getting pimped. And so now we're trying to take that conversation back and put it in their hands. So we're having like listening sessions where we're just going into like specific, like to a neighborhood. We're working with a specific organization in West Philadelphia, and we're just going to talk to their people that come to their community center, teens from LGBT Q youth in that area, and just listen to why they are disengaged, right? And then actually try to figure out and talk to them and get to bridge that gap. But then we're also going to have a broader conversation and a broader listening session across our 2 states in Ohio and Pennsylvania. But the thing we have to do and to bring it back is we have to be willing to get our hands dirty. We have to be willing to take the time, effort, and energy needed to meet people where they are, because we can't just ask them to come to where we are. We have to actually go to these neighborhoods. They have to actually see us every single day, or at least every single week, to know that we're not BSing them, right? We actually care about what they want and what they need, and then start from, and always, I tell them, I was just to say this since I was in high school. It starts from a local level.
Mhm.
Who cares about the federal election? Yes, it matters, right? But the things that matter to them more is our streets are trash. How can we fix that? We got the kids don't have anything to do after school. How are we going to do something about that? The people who can directly affect them about that is their city councilman, is there state reps, is there local nonprofits. So we need to start engaging them in where they specifically are, giving them the resources of the organizations and the elected officials in their direct neighborhood, so then we can start engaging that level of thought. And then once they are engaged on just the local level, we can branch that up to the state level. My mom is, I always try to play with my mom, but she was a very powerful woman, where in the fact that she only cared about local politics. She never wanted to go anywhere else. And she saw tremendous growth, where she was able to see multiple kids from Richmond, Virginia, start going from local elections to now state elections to now they're trying to get into working in on federal elections. But just that is going to be the blueprint. That's how I always felt is the blueprint. It just takes the hard work, which is time, effort, and energy.
Thanks, Tobias. And so I'm gonna ask Calum, like, what can people be on the lookout for, like, you know, all the stuff you're getting in the mail and listening to, like, what can we as individuals also, any advice on managing what you're filtering, you know?
Yeah, it's really hard. And when it comes to talking to other people, I think what Tobias said is perfect. You gotta talk about people, the things that matter to them, and start with, you know, the issues that are important to you. You got to listen before you can do anything else. It's really hard to change someone's values. It's really hard to change what they care about, but it's easier to relate things that you want to talk about to their values. So that means listening and finding places that are common bridge. Even people who believe very, very different things from each other, almost all of them agree about a few things. Like, they want their kids to be safe. They want their drinking water to be clean. Stuff. I'm from Central Michigan, and like everybody in Flint wants lead out of the water. You know, it doesn't matter what you believe in. Besides that, it's a place to start, and you have to build these bridges really slowly, and it's tough and it's annoying, and you'll be angry a lot. You'll be frustrated, so on and so forth. But you like have to push through all that stuff if you're going to do it. When it comes to your own information, being aware of, like, learning a few of the common tactics and seeing them is really important. So when you're on the internet and you see something that makes you really angry that's politically related, almost always, not always, but almost always, there's some idea behind that. There's some reason why it is the way it is. You know, rage bait and stuff like that is everywhere. It's not just things that make you feel good about what you already believe. It's things that make you feel bad about things that you don't believe are part of it. So the stronger your reaction is to something, the more you should be skeptical of it. That doesn't mean that you think it's not true. It just means you do that little extra work to be like, to check, to find another source, to you know, try to confirm it in some way. And another and the last thing I want to say about this, I guess, is that when you do try to fact check things, or you do want to confirm stuff, we tend to look for things that confirm what we already believe. It's called confirmation bias. Start by looking for evidence that what you believe is wrong. Don't start by looking for stuff that tells you that you're already right. That doesn't mean that you're not right. It just means that you'll have a more thorough judgment. The reason that matters so much is not just because you'll have better ideas. It's because when it comes to talk to someone else, like your uncle, your neighbor, whoever, you'll have a better perspective on what they're going to say about it, and you'll be, you know, more capable of having a good conversation with them that preserves that relationship and sets you up to do kind of the tough work that you have to do.
Thanks, and Ruth, your turn on advice moving forward here.
Okay, well, I have a number of positive things that you can do if you want to get involved and you want to make it better. And one of them is to join the Civic Listening Corps, which is a project of the League of Women Voters and the Algorithmic Transparency Institute that tries to track what's going on online, track the misinformation in order to put out pre-bunking messaging on the right topics at the right time. And right now, the League of Women Voters of PA is working with the Algorithmic Transparency Institute to train an AI bot that looks for this disinformation and finds the patterns. And they are looking for a training set of disinformation from social media to train the AI on. So if anyone wants to get involved in that, get in touch with me, or look on the website that I put in the chat. On our website at League of Women Voters PA, we have a page on disinformation, and it links to the Algorithmic Transparency Institute. You can actually sign up to monitor certain social media sites for certain chunks of time and flag what you see and send it into this group. The other thing you can do is you can join like a red and blue conversation team and practice having these tough conversations. And there's links on our page too to a lot of different groups who train on civil conversations over tough topics. And I think that's a real skill that we all need. And it helps you to sort of be the counterexample when things are so polarized. Like if you are a partisan person, you think the other party is all a bunch of evil morons that are somehow trying to destroy America. And the person, if you're knocking on a door and you meet someone of a different party, they may think the same thing about you, but you can be the counterexample. You're like, no, I'm Ruth.
Yeah.
And this is what I think. I don't think that, I care about you. I want to hear what you have to say. And I don't have horns coming out of my head. I don't have a forked tail. It's just me, your neighbor, and you can learn to do that and to sort of defuse the tension and bring it down a notch. I also think that the last several years, ever since 2016, have really been a teachable moment about government, how it works, why it works, how local government affects us, and getting involved in local, like Tobias was saying, I think is where you start, and where you start rebuilding community and rebuilding trust in the community.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you to the three of you for all those great resources. We have room for a couple of questions as a group here to our three speakers before we go into breakout rooms. Any questions?
What is the in general in Allegheny County school districts, how much civic education is going on around voting? How would Ruth rate,
I would say that
the level of civic education of the school district?
It is lacking, and I think about a decade ago they took out the standardized testing on civics and focused on STEM and reading, and social studies went sort of out the window. And as a result of them not tracking the testing, the courses started dropping. We don't have to work on that to pass our tests, and we find that a lot of kids have civics in 9th grade well before they're old enough to actively participate or register to vote. And they don't touch on the topic of civics or voting or participation in democracy again at all. And so when we go in to address the seniors in these schools, we have to go into the English classrooms because the seniors aren't taking any social studies generally. And so we have really tried to work on that. And so when we go in, it's not just a voter registration, it's a how does your government work, and how can you get involved, and then voter registration. And also on our website, we try to continue that, because once you're out of high school, no one's going to deliver any civic ed to you. We try to put up pages on what does county government do? Here's what Allegheny County government does. What's my municipality? How do the municipalities work? We have our actually most popular page on the site is Pennsylvania government. And it's just like a 1-page summary of how Pennsylvania government works. And that kind of floors me, because you think they come to the League of Women Voters for the voter registration page, but they don't. They can go to the state site for that, but there are very few sites with just that really basic information. And we see on the web statistics, we see classrooms logging in and using those sites on Allegheny County government, on Pennsylvania government. And so we're trying to be a resource, but it's really lacking in schools right now, we find.
Any other questions or anything from the chat that we want to pull into here? Yeah, I like that. Ms. Carroll said adults, yeah, reminding us that adults need civic education too, which is 100% true. Jason, are you ready with our breakout rooms?
I can be in a second.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Yep. Oh, wait, just 1 second. Yes, yes, they're ready. But before I open them, we would like, if you could, apologize for the dog barking in the background if you can hear it. Where is it? If Yvette and Janora will be in 2 of the rooms, but for the room that they're not in, can somebody in your room just try to take notes in this document? And there are a few prompts there if your group needs it, but you don't feel obligated to answer the questions that are on this sheet. And so just find one of the rooms that's not being used. We go in the chat, and yeah, and I think that should be it.
Jason,
yes,
if I may, if you end up in a group where there isn't someone to facilitate, kind of try to nominate somebody early in the first minute or so, rather than assume that somebody else is doing it. Because what we don't want is 4 different notes that we don't know who came from what, or nobody taking notes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Janora. And if you do have to drop off, that's fine. We of course want you all to stay for this conversation. Thank you. And I will open up the rooms. And if I find that one room ends up being a lot smaller than the other, I might hop in and shift you all around. Okay. All right. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes, maybe a little longer. Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Oops, can you send me back to the room, please? I think I was in 3.
Can you try again, Christina? It just says you didn't join. I don't know.
It's not popping up again for me to join.
Okay, I will just move. Okay. How do I? Let me see. Never had to do this before. It's not giving me an option to just put you right into that same room, but I will put you into a different room.
That's okay. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for being here. Did it open up for you? Yeah. Okay. I'm recording. So welcome back, everyone. I was not in any of the breakout rooms, so I would love if
this meeting is being recorded.
I would love to hear if there were any kind of really good things that came out of your conversations, any things that stood out to you. Did anything come up in any of the rooms?
We had a really powerful conversation in my group about what struck us about what we heard today. And we heard a lot of people chimed in on that one. A lot of us were struck by the conversation surrounding young voters. We had somebody who was really concerned about the lack of civic education, about continuing conversations outside of election years. And also a really big one too was holding elected officials accountable, and what the power of voting can do in that realm. You know, one of the things that was said in that conversation, I said I was going to list as one of the things that struck me was that there's significant strength in the voices against voting and how scary that idea is. And so those were some of the things that were taken away from my group.
All right, thanks, Janora. Anybody from either of the other two groups?
I have something, but I'll see if the other group has something first.
I'll jump in. The one thing that, if I can remember, that I thought was kind of like really frustrating in this process is understanding that we know that relationships are key to the work that volunteers, community-based organizations, and other grassroots organizations need to do in order to have progressive movement in our work. But that's not the shit that funders want to fund. And I understand that we've had this racial awakening throughout the pandemic, where white people felt guilty for a little bit about having all white organizations and they needed Black people on their organizations. And maybe even the funding guidelines and the grants like widened and loosened a little bit to, you know what, here, just take this money, no strings attached, or here, take this money, no outcomes attached. But there's still this is the analogy I was using, that's air that's pushing up against this urgency for us to build these relationships that the funding community still does not understand. And so until we can get to this point where CMU is not a middleman for communities getting money, or any other organizations aren't middlemen for communities getting money, for us to take the time to build these relationships, we need to have a very honest conversation with the philanthropic community, or the giving community, the banks, which are not a part of these conversations, and they need to be a part of these conversations. They have community-based guidelines that they must follow. And so if we have a better understanding of why the philanthropic community or the giving community or the funding community is okay with the divisive giving system that they give into, then we will not have a better opportunity to progress forward incrementally, intentionally, and impactfully to build relationships that we need, so that our organizations and that these fights don't feel so heavy and burdensome on these groups. We need to understand how we can better fund relationships. And I don't just mean give this group 12 months to host these 12 meetings and come and meet to the outcome. I'm talking about relationships that we can pull up to these leadership positions, so we can have people in these rooms to have these conversations. We are losing out because we are not in the room where this shit is happening. And so we need to have a better understanding of why there's divisive giving in the region, and why we are not able to build the relationships we need to move our impact forward. Not organizational impact, regional, city, regional, absolute regional impact. So that's my thought.
I don't think I can follow up on that, Jason. So I'm gonna have Alyssa have the last word there.
Okay, all right. Any other final thoughts, or anybody want to respond to Alyssa? You know, don't want to start an entire new conversation. I mean, you're welcome to start a new conversation now if you all want to stay on, but yeah, any other, Tobias?
I just want to just piggyback just from a personal experience with what Alyssa said. A lot of like young folks who get into the movement, that burns them out when they realize, when they work in these structures, that is more about like the financial aspect of getting. Like, I used to work for a union. The main thing that mattered was just getting people to sign up for the union. It wasn't about the issues that the people were having. So, and then that causes burnout. So I think I want to just big up what you actually said, is because that is causing a lot of people to be like, well, this entire system sucks, because the quote unquote organizations that matter, they don't actually care. They actually just care about things that makes them bigger, and then it actually gives them more funding, which actually makes them seem more powerful. But it's not actually about the people who are actually hurting. So thanks for you for picking that up.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Tobias. Yeah, we see some little comments and emojis in the chats. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. We are running a little short on time. There will be a newsletter coming out in the next couple of weeks announcing some events. If anybody has any event that's coming out this week, I see Ms. Thea put in the information in the chat for the People's Assembly for Fair Housing and Equitable Housing on April 13th. That is going to be at the Frick Fine Arts Building at the University of Pittsburgh. I guess that's the registration form there. So thank you for sharing that, Ms. Thea. We'll put that in the newsletter too. If there's anything else that anybody has coming up, you want to drop it in the chat now, that'd be great. Otherwise, we will be having our next network meeting in June. I think it's June 6th, which I believe is a Tuesday or Thursday. I think it's a Thursday, actually. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you all for being here today. We thank our speakers again, Tobias Estes, Calum Matheson, and Ruth Quint. Thank you all for being here. Thank you especially to Ruth for being able to join on very short. Oh, Ruth had to leave. That's right.
Yeah, she did. She says goodbye.
Okay, but thank her for being here too on short notice as well. So thank you all. Again, we'll have this recording up as soon as we can, and we will share out the link to you all. Thank you all. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you.